Hello, and welcome to our What to Read Next Spring Forward edition, where we're going to talk about some nonfiction titles. I don't consider myself to be a nonfiction reader. If you've come to these before, I usually do romance. But today I'm here to tell you some nonfiction titles that I've found that I really enjoy. And so don't be afraid of nonfiction, because you might just find your favorite author. David Sedaris is one of my favorite authors. He writes short stories, but they end up in nonfiction. My favorite blog that I follow is by the bloggist. Her name is Jenny Lawson, and this is her title, her latest one. But they're all in nonfiction because they end up being like memoirs. My favorite movie, The Princess Bride. Carrie Elways wrote a book about it. You can find it in our nonfiction 700 section. I love crafting. I learned how to do origami based on these books that I found in our nonfiction section. I spent a few dollars on origami paper and had a whole new hobby. So today I'm going to recommend two really amazing books to you that are available from nonfiction. And the first one is Talking to Strangers, What We Should Know About the People We Don't Know by Malcolm Gladwell. And if you've never read Malcolm Gladwell before, he takes headlines and popular themes and current events and dissects them to kind of get a deeper look about what's really happening. His pop nonfiction is so enlightening and intriguing that I'm torn between reading it like as fast as I can, jumping to the next chapter, finding out what happens, and putting it down to really let each chapter soak in and kind of think about it. So I kind of do both, and then I forget, and then I go back and read it again because it's really amazing. As the title indicates, the book is about communication, but it's also about so much more. He starts out into the introduction talking about Sandra Bland. She was an African-American woman who was pulled over for a routine traffic stop. It was actually so small that the officer wasn't going to even write her a ticket. However, the miscommunication and dialogue between the officer and Sandra Bland escalated to the point where he arrested her and she committed suicide in police custody. So, the book winds through like miscommunication, deception, cultural differences, consent, policing tactics, and like the coupling of circumstances that lead things to escalate. It's a really amazing and powerful book. I'm not a big news reader or watcher, but all of the events discussed in the book were things that I was aware of. And yet the way he breaks them down and shows the overall circumstance and how they relate to each other and larger societal issues is just so intriguing and amazing. I could not stop talking about this book the whole time I read it. I was like telling my family over and over, oh my gosh, and this, oh my gosh, and this. So it's a really amazing book. He has a lot of great stories and just like interesting. It's written in a way that he doesn't get too deep into the minutia of the studies. And yet at the back, he has a whole notes section full of the studies that he used to base all of his research on. So it's just this amazing book, Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. And then the other one that I chose for today is Everybody Yoga. Let Go of the Fear, Get on the Mat, Love Your Body by Jessamine Stanley. It's awesome. When I started working on the diet, fiction, and health session, I was a little nervous. It's not my area of expertise. However, there are some real gems in that section. I was a dancer in high school. And when I found yoga and Pilates, I really appreciated like the stretching while strengthening aspect of it. But after my children were born, I really struggled with having a body shape and size that was suddenly different to me and unsuited to most yoga poses. My knees are bony, my wrists are weak, my generous midsection makes folding in half really difficult. But this book is amazing. She offers tons of advice and modifications for taking pressure off the wrist, props like folded knit blankets under tender knees, and gentle reminders to give yourself space by spreading the knees during folds, and permission to go as slow as you need to and use the modifications that will help you for as long as necessary. She breaks down different poses with pictures. This is one of my favorites. She talks about the reclined bound angle pose, and you can see that this is sort of like the standard, and then this is the modifications. So it's really cool. She also talks about different types of yoga and like the history and philosophy of yoga. And so she has this cool section like about the differences between historical and modern yoga. And it's like a table and you can just kind of look at it. It's really neat. And then she has a cool chart about the types of practices that you can use. And so if you're like, what's the difference between Bikram and Yin yoga or Kundalini or Ashtanga? It's really, really great book. I think it would be a great read for anyone who's interested in yoga, or even people who have kind of done a lot of yoga but don't maybe have been to one class consistently for a long time. It might encourage you to look into what different types of yoga are. And if you want to do yoga and you've never done it before, or you're like worried to try because you don't look like the people in the yoga clothes ads, this is a good book for you. So give it a shot. It's called Everybody Yoga by Jessamine Stanley. Next, I'm going to pass this over to Ashton, who's going to talk about some amazing nonfiction memoirs.
Hello, everyone. So today I'm going to bring you a couple memoirs to spring forward with into the new season. Unfortunately, I don't have copies of the books, so you will just have to picture them or go check them out. I'm always here to endorse queer, feminist, women-centric titles, and this month is no different, so let's get started. My first title is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. First, my preface for both of these books is that they do involve very detailed graphic accounts of abuse. So please tread lightly if those kinds of reads are really difficult for you. This particular read is a beautiful, beautiful and heartbreaking memoir where Machado takes us through her abusive relationship with another woman. Each chapter is an exploration of varying genres and stylistic approaches, but they're all threaded with this like growing anxiety of claustrophobia that Machado feels within the dream house, or the house that her and her partner share together. In the Dream House is very immersive. It's a very unsettling book. It's both smothering and freeing as we, the readers, hope desperately that Machado will escape the dream house and rebuild her self-worth, which gets just terrifyingly eroded by her partner throughout their relationship. The entire time you're reading this book, you will marvel at the beauty of Machado's writing while also wishing that she never had to write this memoir in the first place, because it's a very difficult situation that she was in for many years. And it's also a very overlooked story as well. The queer experience of abuse, trauma, suffering at the hands of another woman or a same-sex partner. So even though it's a difficult read, it's a beautiful read, and I highly encourage everyone to read this memoir, but also maybe to practice a little self-care after, like go take a walk or something. My second title is Hunger by Roxane Gay. So if you're feeling a little overly inundated with diet and weight loss ads as we move closer and closer to summer, this is the memoir for you to read. Hunger is a story that centers around Gay's fraught relationship with her size and her weight in the aftermath of a brutal assault when she was 12 years old. Food and her seemingly endless hunger was the solution to the problem that was her body. She describes eating as a safety tool in response to her PTSD from her rape, but as she grows older and her size increases, the entire world decides to make her body their issue. The conflict of the memoir is that Gay's body feels to her that it is rarely her own. She describes numerous, very unsettling, very visceral conversations and encounters with both strangers and loved ones where they express horror, concern, or disappointment at her eating patterns. The overriding message, though, that any reader should take from this book is this. Gay is not necessarily promoting body positivity, but she's also not necessarily promoting the healing nature of weight loss. She's telling the very unflinching reality of being marked as other by trauma without her consent from a very early age, and how the world continues to other her through her body, through her sexuality, and through her skin color. Trauma is not a success story, and she also makes that very clear, but that's the beauty of Hunger. Gay has love and happiness in her life, and she does have a happy ending. You can always check her Instagram and see how great and happy her life is right now. But it's not because of or in spite of her body. It's her moments of true peace within the memoir is when she and her body just simply exist. I really love both of these memoirs and I highly recommend them. But please, again, take care of yourself when you're reading them. Go on a walk, have a cup of tea, watch something that's more decompressing. But they're really, really great reads, and we have both of them in our collection. Well, that's all I have for everyone today. I'm going to pass it off to the lovely Sarah so she can talk about some of her picks with you.
All right, thanks, Ashton. Well, hi, everybody. I wanted to tell you about things that bring me joy. So, of course, books bring me joy, but another thing that brings me joy is my houseplants. And so when we talk about books about houseplants, it's like double the joy. So the first book that I have to talk to you about is, I hear from a lot of people, oh, my house is so dark, I can't do houseplants, and I'm so intimidated. It seems really complicated. Well, this book, Grow in the Dark, How to Choose and Care for Low Light Houseplants by Lisa Eldred Steinkopf, is a quick and accessible guide for the absolute beginner. The author's a houseplant enthusiast, and she shares with you different profiles for low to medium light houseplants. And so this is really good for the absolute beginner. The first half of the book just gives you some really basic tips like, hey, set up a watering schedule, put it in your calendar. Otherwise, you're going to water that plant to death. And then the back of the book, it just has these nice profiles with big pictures. So if you're in a hurry, you can just kind of flip through it. Like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. Oh, that looks cool. What's that one called? Where do I put that? And then you can just go and order it on Etsy or make a list, take it down to the garden store. So it's a super nice way to start, even if you don't have a lot of big, glorious windows in your place. And speaking of Googling all over the place, because, you can find information about houseplants online. But sometimes I get frustrated because, I'll find one page and it says, oh, we'll take care of this houseplant this way. And then another page says, no, you don't want to do that, you want to do this. And then there's, all this confusion ensues. So what I like about this book, this one's called Plant Parenting. Easy ways to make more houseplants, vegetables, and flowers. And the author, Leslie Halleck, is a horticulturist. So she's very authoritative when she writes about propagating plants. And so she's going to teach you about starting houseplants and garden veggies from seed, saving seed, water rooting, ground and air layering, setting up indoor lighting, common pests and diseases, and all these cool ideas for toys. And, oh, did I say toys? I meant tools, but they're kind of my toys. For working with your houseplants. So maybe you can do the basic stuff. Sure, I can put some little spider plants here in this jar of water and they grow roots. But if you kind of want to get into the more complicated plants, or you want to really break it down and get really scientific about it. Now she goes in deep in this book. So, for example, if you wanted to be able to impress your friends with phrases like, girl, the interveinal chlorosis on those leaves indicate nutrient deficiencies. Or, hey, don't put that humidity dome over that leaf petiole cutting. That plant is susceptible to fungal diseases. If you read it, you can get really in-depth stuff like that. But if the science explanations go a little too deep for you, it also just has a lot of tables and then pictures with step-by-step. So you can kind of skip over some of the really in-depth stuff if you want. and just get the basics that you need by using the references in there and the tables and things. All right, and then the last book I have for you is P. Allen Smith's Bringing the Garden Indoors. You might have heard of him because he has a TV show. Now, this is a book about decorating your home with plants. And it's an older book, so you're gonna see that like the pictures and the ideas in it aren't really like of the moment on trend. But for me, I find that things like that I do better just looking through Pinterest or Instagram or something to get really like the trendiest ideas. This one I really like because he knows a lot of sort of timeless principles of home decorating. And so I really enjoyed some of the things that he thinks of that I just think, well, why didn't I think of that? You know, so many of us are spending a lot of times in our homes right now, and we want to make our homes a really like harmonious place. So he had ideas like ways that you can create harmony between your plants and the art on your walls. Now, his home decorating budget, I think, is a little higher than mine, so I might be creating some harmony between my plants and the posters on my walls, but I still appreciated those ideas. Or things like growing plants on your outdoor patio table that repel insects. What a great idea! Or planting houseplants in your bedroom that take toxins out of the air and release oxygen. So great ideas for just making your house more pleasant and relaxing and a more harmonious place to be. So check that one out too. All right, well, I hope that these books give you a lot of joy and, you know, try out some houseplants. I think they're gonna bring some enjoyment to your life. All right, so coming up next, I have Jay.
There I am. Hi, everybody. I'm Jay, and I work here in the Children's Department of Eugene Public Library, and I've been here for just shy of 20 years now, and I specialize in nonfiction, so when I heard we were doing a nonfiction reader's advisory, it was like, yeah, I'm there. And today I'm going to talk about two books that won Cybert Awards for Best Children's Nonfiction last year, well, 2021. And they are two authors that are absolute powerhouses in the children's nonfiction, and they're absolutely at the top of their game. The first book I want to talk about won the Cybert Award. Oh, the John F. Cybert Award is given for Most Distinguished Informational Children's Book that was published that year. And this year it was won by Candace Fleming and her illustrator partner, Eric Roman, and the book is called Honeybee, The Busy Life of Apis mellifera. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And I read this book and I just put it down and went, that is a splendid book. And the very next day, my friend says, hey, did you see who won the Cybert Award? It was that book, Honeybee. And I went, yes, that was such a beautiful book. This book is really wonderful. The illustrations are just lush and they're big. It's every page. I don't have the book. It's just the cover I photocopied. I don't have the book because it's quite popular and there's a long hold list for it, and so I can't just grab it for a program like this. Anyway, every page has a big lush illustration like this, and then in the center of the book, when the bee, the description of the book is written in a very kind of free verse sort of prosy sort of style, and it's very well done. There isn't a lot of text in it, and yet there's plenty of information given, even though this text is fairly sparse. And then the illustrations add to the story and help tell the story that the text is telling. And what I didn't know when I read this book is that bees, I knew that they were born and they went through a couple of stages, but they have different work duties at different parts of their lives according to how old they are. And also I didn't know that most bees only live about a month or maybe a month and a half or two at the max. And especially bees that are born in the spring aren't going to live through the whole summer. And so this book tells the whole story of this one honeybee who's born in the hive and grows up and becomes a sister and goes through each stage of the different work things. And the book is this would make a great read aloud because the book kind of builds up to, is the bee ready to go out and gather honey, you know, and get nectar from the flowers? Not yet. and the bee moves on to the next stage of work where she's doing something else, helping to clean the hive or helping to guard the hive or tending to the queen. And so so then finally, in the middle of the book, she finally becomes a worker bee and or a collector and is able to go out and gather pollen and nectar from the flowers. And that has a double page spread. And so this book, I just think it's a great book. And spoiler alert, it covers the whole life of the bee. And so by the end, the bee is a little bee carcass on a leaf. And, you know, the bees are not anthropomorphized at all. The illustrations are realistic. And the text, the bees don't speak or anything. And so it's just describing the life of a honeybee. And yet you get to the end, and the tears are welling up in your eyes because you saw the whole life of this bee. And so this book, you can't go wrong with it. And in fact, if you get any book by Candace Fleming, you can't go wrong with it. And she and the same illustrator partner, Eric Roman, won Cybert Awards a few years ago for their book Giant Squid, which we have in the library. And it is just as good, I think, as Honeybee. And so you can't go wrong with that book. And then the next book I'm going to talk about was a Cybert honors book. And it is called How We Got to the Moon by a man known primarily for his illustrations, John Rocco. And he's done a lot of work, and he's made some really excellent picture books, and he is just a beautiful illustrator. And this book, if you read the reviews, everyone says stunning, a masterpiece, you know, and it was epic. It's a big book. There's a lot in it, and it takes a little while to read, even though I found it so engaging. I couldn't put it down once I started it. I wanted to just get back and read it at every free moment I had. And it's the book. John Rocco is primarily known for illustrations, but he wrote all the text for this too. And this was quite a project. In 2019 was the 50th anniversary of the first flight to the moon, when humans first went to the moon. And there were a raft of books that came out at that time, and a lot of them were very good. But I have to say, this book is just head and shoulders above anything else I read in that genre. It is just a masterpiece. It goes through the entire Apollo space program piece by piece and talks about how all these different things had to come together to make it. And we forget now that space flight has become so routine that there were things that back then that they didn't know and that weren't givens. Like, do we use a multi-stage rocket to get into space? Is that the best way to do it? Can we actually shoot two spacecraft up on the same rocket and then have them dock in orbit? That just sounds so far-fetched. It was like you could see the engineers going, no, that'll never work. And then they looked at all the options and went, well, that's the only thing that's going to work. And so this is almost a graphic novel sort of an experience, because the illustrations add so much to the story, and the text goes over every individual piece that had to come together for Apollo's, from dietitians, and somebody had designed the little bags they poo in space, and designed special diets, and they had to hire the best seamstresses in the world. They made this parachute that was the biggest parachute anybody had ever made, and it had to be made so that it would safely and certainly deliver when it was time for the parachute to be deployed. So they hired seamstresses who were so good that they could reliably, just by eye, do 32 stitches per inch. So they went and sewed this gigantic parachute, and they labeled each inch, and somebody actually went along and counted all these stitches. And then every seamstress signed off on the piece that she had sewn, so that if it wasn't right, they could come back and give her a demerit. I don't know what, just so that they knew who did it. And it was just an amazing story. And after you finish the book, you just think, wow, this was an epic human undertaking. I can't really believe that we did this. And the illustrations, I got to say, are just fantastic. Rocco is able to draw humans, and this is a realistic book. And so they have just the littlest bit of exaggeration or caricature to them, but his illustrations are so good that even if he was just drawing, as he did in one point, two men sitting at a desk thinking about a problem, and one guy's got his hand mashed up against his face, and another one's rubbing his chin. And I looked at that and I went, it's so mundane, and yet he makes it really come alive, and the people look really alive in it. And spoiler alert, we do get to the moon. And the book just has a wonderful narrative to it that builds up to the liftoff of the Saturn V rocket, climaxes with their arrival at the moon, and then there's the death-defying re-entry to Earth's atmosphere, and the gigantic parachutes deploy and they're back on Earth safe. And I just couldn't get enough of this book. I know that Honeybee won, but this book is just a work of art, and so it's worth picking up. And then you look at some of the other John Rocco's other artwork. He did covers for Rick Riordan's graphic novels, and he's done some great picture books, and he's just a great artist, and he's turned out to be a great writer too. So he's another one who is at the top of his game, and both of these books are just excellent. Stop in and say hi to me in the children's department anytime. And I love to help kids find books, especially nonfiction books that are great reads. And now I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Alec.
All right, I'm going to close us out with a few more recommendations for the young or young at heart. I am not in a beautiful office like Sarah with plants behind me, but I do at least have some sunshine, so that's nice. The first book I want to talk about is one in a line of series called Maker Comics. These are nonfiction comics that we actually have in the comic collection in children's. I would say these are good for 8 to 12. They're on a variety of topics. This one happens to be Grow a Garden. There are plenty of gardening books in the regular nonfiction section, and we'd be happy to help you find those anytime. But this one I chose because it's a little unusual. If you know First Second's Maker Comics line, then you know that these graphic novel DIY guides are perfect for tweens who like their learning with a little bit of extra pizzazz and silliness. The format, which might remind some who are familiar with the Magic School Bus books, mixes real facts with a fictional storyline. In this one, I'll read the description so you kind of get a sense, but spoiler alert that it has gnomes in it, which those who know me know that I love gnomes. So Will, Violet, and Basil must be the unluckiest students at the Garden Gnome Academy. They've been stuck with Mr. Butternut, the school's most unpopular and unusual teacher. Will and his friends have to learn about soil and compost, while their classmates get to study exotic plants and butterflies. Although things get a little messy and stinky in his class, Mr. Butternut does know a thing or two about growing delicious veggies. So in this book, they get to have a fun fictional adventure at their Garden Gnome Academy while learning about compost and veggies. It is the book that will give you all the dirt that you need on growing vegetables. There are also step-by-step instructions for gardening activities throughout. And then just to give you a sense of what it looks like, there's a lot of text in this one, but very helpful combination of fact and fiction. So check out Maker Comics, Grow a Garden, or any of these. This one is by Alexis Frederick Frost. Usually they're written by a different author or illustrator combination, but this one is a great one to check out. Next, I have a book that I also don't have a copy of, so I'm going to just show you the cover, but this is a picture book called The Secret Garden of George Washington Carver. Did you know that before George Washington Carver became known for his agricultural expertise, he tended to a secret garden of flowers as a kid? When I was thinking about books that reminded me of gardens, I vividly pictured this one in my mind because, first of all, it's gorgeous. This book is by Jean Beretta with pictures by Frank Morrison, who is an absolute superstar. This came out last year. It opens with Carver. I was going to open it, but it's not there. It opens with Carver as an adult, addressing a room full of white congressmen in 1921, and then it rewinds to his childhood in that secret garden. Shut out from schools because he was Black, Carver took his education into his own hands. Literally, in his magical garden, he learned how to protect the roots through winter so that the flowers could be reborn in spring. He gave daisies haircuts by clipping off dry petals. He painted life cycles of flowers and studied each season. Eventually, Carver does share his secret and he becomes the local plant doctor. And, well, the rest is history. Frank Morrison's portraiture and lush forest scenes take this already incredible book to next level greatness. And I'll close out this one by sharing the last bit of the book, which are words from Carver himself, where he says, regard nature, revere nature, respect nature, and I'll add my own, get this book. Okay, and I'll have a quick last, because I got to sneak in a third one. This is All 13, The Incredible Cave Rescue of the Thai Boys Soccer Team by Christina Soon-Tornvat. I haven't read this yet, but it's at the top of my to-be read pile. This is for ages 9 to 14, so tweens and younger teens. This book has earned all sorts of honors. It has a Cybert honor and 3 others. It's like incredible. Lots of holds on this one already, but you can add yourself to the list. It is the real life story of how in 2018, 12 members of the Wild Boars soccer team and their assistant coach were trapped in a cave for 18 days. It's not the first book on this topic. There are a few, but survey says 4 honors, it's the best. I don't have a lot else to say about it yet because I'm really excited to read it. But if you or a tween or teen you know likes narrative nonfiction that reads like an adventure story, consider this your official invitation to join me on the holds list. All right, so those are the 3 books I was going to share today. I'm going to bring everybody back to say goodbye. All of these books are in a list in the description underneath this video, so feel free to place a hold or contact us anytime. But for now, we're going to say bye. Thanks for joining us.
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.